The enemy is approaching.
Decoding transmission.
Upgrade in progress.
Yes. As you wish.
Awaiting orders.
Our hold on this system must not be compromised. Seek out and destroy every intruder to our system.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Star Wars Empire War, the Imperial campaign, where today we are over Korrilag. Temporarily, the Rebel Alliance has decided to launch another attack against our fortifications over this world. And here we've got a new kind of fleet composition that I had wanted to try out, kind of just over the period between episodes, and it involved having Tartan patrol cruisers protecting the broadside cruisers that we've got there, just because the broadside cruisers are quite effective at clearing out fighters and the bombers. I think I mentioned this in a previous episode, and I figured, hey, the Tartan patrol cruisers would be good for running interference between the any like fighters and bombers that made it through, while the broadside cruisers also worked over any enemy starships like the Nebulon B frigates and the Corellian corvettes. Unfortunately, I think, as you'll probably see as this battle plays out, that wasn't quite how it ends up working. But the combination did prove to, you know, alongside with several upgrades from the starbase, did prove to clear out a large portion of the enemy fleet. So I wouldn't say it was a complete waste of resources that could definitely have been used elsewhere. But it definitely opens up some extra strategies that we can try playing around with in later space fleets. I know particularly once we can get, I think it's like a hypervelocity gun that the Empire gets, it will definitely make it a lot easier to hold the space around a planet. But for now, as you can see, we are kind of trying to keep most of our fleet by the starbase, because the starbase has its own firepower that from I think about level 3 onwards is quite good at taking out some of the smaller starships, particularly if you can knock out all of the enemy fighters. I do end up, I think, as I mentioned before, losing all of the broadside cruisers, despite my hardest attempt to avoid such a fate. We also lose Darth Vader and the fleet commander, who was in one of the Tartan patrol cruisers. I really think it would be kind of neat if the fleet commanders, if they were part of a fleet that's in orbit around a planet with a starbase, a friendly starbase, if the fleet commanders would be inside the starbase, just because to me that makes a little bit more sense, particularly from like you wouldn't have the fleet commander on a starship that would be targeted fairly easily or fairly regularly. Although that logic doesn't really hold true, because the station tends to be the main target of the invading fleets. The starbase, I believe, I use it to target kind of the weapon hardpoints on a lot of the starships, just because if you can take out the weapon hardpoints, even if they've still got their engines or their shields, their shield hardpoints, they can't actually shoot back, which means they're kind of just sitting there taking up population, taking up like the population cap of the enemy fleet, which isn't, you know, necessarily a bad thing. Like, sure, they can see where you are, and if they've got any long-range missile cruisers, I think the Rebel Alliance is the Marauders, that could be quite devastating. However, the fleet that attacked Koralag, I think that's how I've been pronouncing it. The fleet that took Koralag, tried to take Koralag. As you can see, they're almost completely wiped out at this stage. Didn't have any Marauder cruisers. Instead, it was mostly the Y-Wings, Nebulon Bs, and Corellian corvettes. The Y-Wings, of course, all being taken out in that initial rush of the Rebel Alliance when we had all 4 of our broadside cruisers. At the moment, it's just really like a mopping up of the enemy fleet, simply because, well, they don't have the firepower to penetrate the shields of the starbase, particularly now that it's fully upgraded. Well, not fully upgraded, but as we've capped out the upgrades for the starbase at, I think it's a level 3, yeah. We've capped out the level 3 upgrades, so really we're just letting the starbase target the Corellian corvettes and knock them out in its kind of its own time. This episode is actually the second time that I tried to record this week's episode. The initial one ended up just being like a bunch of mostly defensive battles trying to stop the Rebel Alliance from pushing forward, and I was like, actually, none of this is really usable.
Vehicle in production.
So I recorded like a bunch of videos on Monday this week, and on Tuesday I was kind of looking at it after getting home from work, and I was like, actually, none of this is usable. So what we'll do instead is we'll delete this and we'll re-record a new episode from the point that I left off in the previous attempt at recording this week's episode. And I instead chose to do this, where the target for this episode is actually attacking Sullust in an attempt to kind of shore up our defenses and stop the Rebel Alliance from being able to attack us almost as often as they are, simply because, like, I spent a lot of time over Bastine, Koralag, Bus, and Coruscant trying to stop the Rebel Alliance from taking these worlds, because really funding the Imperial Navy and the Imperial Army is an expensive endeavor, and I think I learnt from the mistakes of the previous campaign.
Ground bases are the backbone of our defenses. We need to increase their number if we are to teach the rebellion that their cause is a losing proposition.
Gearing up.
So the rebellion did attack, did launch a ground invasion of Bis simply because I didn't have a star base or a fleet protecting the the orbit of Bis, but we do have a significant sized ground force, consisting of mostly Stormtroopers, I believe. And so, as you can see in the mini-map, we're just kind of like deploying the mass of Stormtroopers there in an attempt to kind of secure the one point that the Rebel Alliance has.
Scout trooper active.
I make regular use of the scout troopers, sending them in constantly to see if I can like contest that cap point. The inhabitants that we have there, I also send them in.
Ready to go.
And the idea behind this strategy is to just overwhelm the enemy landing force as they're trying to land, because if you can contest that landing point, and stop them from being able to bring in reinforcements, particularly once you've wiped out all of their infantry who have landed on the planet, they can no longer deploy anything, because vehicles can't capture reinforcement points or any of the build pads that tend to be scattered around the place, around the surface of the planet. So yeah, a lot of this battle was spent kind of. Well, I wouldn't say a lot of it actually. The one thing that I did was I moved the entire force. I just immediately sent the entire force towards that one cap point, and as you can see, we've already started to take it from the Rebel Alliance.
Hello, Commander.
And any
Heading out, sir.
Unit destroyed.
any garrison units that respawn, I immediately send them over to the cap point. As you can see, we've taken the reinforcement point, so the Rebel Alliance can no longer deploy troops, which means that mopping up the remaining vehicles that they've got on the planet's surface is pretty simple, particularly when you have, I think it's like 20 maybe 20 something stormtrooper squads, sorry, stormtrooper platoons. As you can see, I did say we had wiped them all out, but we hadn't quite done it there.
Yes, sir.
But it is just a couple of police soldiers, so the ATSC are kind of deployed to scare them away from that capture point, because of course if they capture that, they can start bringing in more troops, and it is awfully close to the power generator, which powers the turbolaser batteries that are scattered around the map.
Engaging rebel forces.
But I think the main issue is knocking out these.
All right, men, take cover. Support order.
Yeah, so there you go. I don't know if you can see, but there are 24 stormtroopers. Well, not 24 stormtroopers, but there are 24 stormtrooper squads.
On my way.
No, platoons.
Ready to go.
But
Broadside
yeah,
cruiser reporting.
pretty much fairly easy to sort out once we're knocked out.
Vehicle in production.
Well, once we captured that one point. So there I had kind of considered sending the fleet over Geonosis to Iridio in an attempt to see if I could take that as well and just secure one more planet. But instead I decided that we're going to mobilize the entire Imperial Navy to secure orbit around Sullust, because I think that was the world where a lot of the Rebel Alliance's attacks were coming from, particularly against Bastine and Corelli.
Look, sir, it's them. Reporting in. Warm up. We're in attack.
This pitiful force is preventing our assault on this system. Dispatch them so that we can secure orbit for the Empire.
Alright, so this battle is fairly shorter, but is kind of important because this this particular battle shows the importance of having broadside cruisers kind of in your earlier tech tree fleets. You can use the Victory class and the Acclimators to kind of take care of the patrol cruisers and anything else that any of the heavier starships that may try to attack the broadsides. But the broadsides are really effective at taking out the space stations. And if you've got, you know, 3 or 4 of them, you know, it doesn't take many. But if you have 3 or 4 of them in your fleet, sometimes it's particularly useful to have more kind of in the reserves waiting to be redeployed. They can make short work of the space station, as you can see here. They're really not too particularly worried about the enemy shields, and the only thing that you got to worry about is concentrated X-wing, A-wing, Y-wing attack fleets that may try to
Roger that.
Yes, Commander.
that may try to take out the broadsides, you know, with the X-wings or the A-wings running interference and concentrating on soaking up as many of the broadsides missile barrages as possible, while the Y-wings actually do the actual damage.
Concentrating firepower.
Yeah, as I said, this was a rather quick one, and it was just so that we could clear out the enemy force and actually get our landing party in and start you know, taking the ground of Sullust so that we have this planet under our control, and so that we can kind of redeploy a lot of our fleet, a lot of the ground bases behind on Bastine and Korolak to be producing credits versus military equipment to aid.
All right, men, load your weapons.
Removing their land bases in the area would go a long way in helping us keep the rebels out of our space. See to it.
Open fire.
So here I'm kind of deploying the entire Imperial army, or all of the Stormtrooper companies that were previously stationed on worlds that are well and truly secured, or worlds where we have started upgrading their defenses to include the Imperial artillery units. I think it's the SPMATs, the self-propelled magnet pulse something or other. But here I deployed the entire army. Not all in one go, of course, but it is a significant portion. I deploy them, and I think, yeah, deploy them in like groups of 5. Well, we can only have like a maximum of 5 companies at a time, or 5 complete companies at a time. And this kind of, I think I had like a total of 40. There was like a total of something ridiculous, like 40 or 44 companies of stormtroopers in total that I had prepared for the invasion fleet. And it leads to kind of like a very amusing battle where we've essentially converted the soldiers of the Galactic Empire into members of the Imperium of Man's army, or the Imperium's army. You know, just hundreds upon hundreds of stormtroopers, just able to deploy all of them at once, and you know, just kind of not really worrying too much about not really worrying about any other consequences of deploying, of losing a significant portion of the a significant portion of our landing force.
Yes, sir.
As you can see, we're deploying more stormtroopers and kind of just pushing them all forward into the pushing them all forward to attack the I think they're the T2B tanks. Yeah, so the T2B hover tanks. And I discovered, actually, I think in between episodes, that the just a swarm of stormtroopers is really effective at taking out a even like a group of T2B tanks. You know, just the amount of firepower that you can leverage quickly drains their shields, and then next thing you know, the vehicles themselves are already dead. As you can see, the shields are trying to regenerate, but once those shields are down, the tank itself is quick to knock out. We're going to just moving the stormtroopers around to clear out any of the opponents who thought that they could potentially take out this, basically this army of stormtroopers. A lot of this battle is kind of spent just running the stormtroopers around. As you can see, they're advancing rather quickly, and it really was just a simple matter of finding the enemy base and then taking it out. Obviously, with numbers on our side, it wouldn't take long for us to take any of the opponent, strip the opponent of any of their defenses.
Reporting. Let's go.
I am fairly more aggressive, and I think part of this is because of the large army that we have been able to deploy on Sullust.
Order acknowledged.
And it results in,
yes, Commander.
well, because we've got so many troops who we have in reserve, without any real threat to them just being instantly taken out by either the rebel artillery or their, I think it's the T4B
Moving out.
or something, the T4 tanks,
Targeting.
which are tracked vehicles, and so they can kind of just, like the TIE Maulers, just drive through infantry squads.
Awaiting orders.
But I'm not, so because I'm not having to worry about any of that, I'm not particularly worried about just kind of throwing a massive infantry in to knock out the enemy. As you can see, dropping a bombing run along the T2Bs to clear them out. There was a moment actually where I looked at it as the Stormtroopers moved over the corpses of their fallen comrades, and I thought maybe the bombing run had taken out a significant portion of my own squads, but looking at it, it was simply because there were just so many T2Bs that the infantry were just kind of falling before them. But yeah, as you can see, even with a number of T2B tanks, if you can concentrate those, concentrate the firepower of your infantry, it's really not an issue when it comes to like the enemy trying to take you out. So the bombing strike that I had launched on the T2B tanks had also taken out the rebels infantry barracks, which is quite useful because it means that they can no longer deploy nearly as many infantry when it comes to, you know, to take out the invading force or counter cap the reinforcement point, as we did on the battle on this. But yeah, this is one of those games where I was actually really happy with the outcome. I did throw away a significant portion of our of the army, but I kind of looked at the strategy and was like, hey, this is actually quite good, particularly if I don't mind playing the long game and kind of just overwhelming the enemy. It would be a similar strategy to just deploying numerous Tartan patrol cruisers, except the only problem is that there are easy counters to the Tartan patrol cruisers, that being swarms of starfighters, or even, like, it doesn't even have to be like a huge thing, it could be something as small as just like the starbase, you know, it can be a high enough level and you can't penetrate the shields. Although that's kind of where like a fleet of either the acclimators or the victory class would be, technically speaking, quite useful, because you can use them to deploy their TIE bombers and their TIE fighters, and then as they're trying to, as the Star Destroyers themselves, or the victory with the acclimators, are trying to push forward to take out the enemy.
Choose your reinforcements. Advancing.
The enemy starbase.
Moving to that area, sir.
They could be cycling out their fighter complement to, of course, take out the enemy starbase, or even take out things like their shields or their hangar, which of course limits the ability of the enemy. But here is another example of just like massing your infantry and kind of the firepower that can bring to bear. Building was already at half health. I don't think that matters too much in the grand scheme of things. Like, at the end of the day, it was knocked out fairly quickly. We are leaving a squad behind at our cap to just make sure that if the enemy did try anything, they can't come in and just sneakily take that cap away from us. But yeah, I think after knocking out that light vehicle factory, it quickly became just a simple matter of hunting down the last enemy base, knocking that out, the last enemy base structure, knocking that out, and then kind of clearing up the remains of the enemy. I think they only had like a couple of T2B tanks and a couple of squads of infantry. I kind of got halfway through this battle where I was at the start of the battle, and I was like, oh, maybe I should just retreat and hold off invading until I can get Darth Vader back, because having Darth Vader is quite useful. But then I was like, actually no, like we've already lost too many troops to kind of leave it at the hands of to retreat and then come back with Darth Vader, just so that we can be like, hey, we can use Darth Vader. Here, as you can see, TIE bombers came through. They knocked out the officer academy. That was the last enemy structure, which of course means that they have quickly lost control of this world. So I think they're moving to try and cap the reinforcement point so that they can pull their troops out. But I'm like, no, this isn't happening. We're going to knock out all of your stuff, and we're going to ensure that this world is held by the Empire and the Empire alone. So taking out the anti-infantry turret was the first thing that needed to happen. And once that was done, the infantry fell pretty quickly. I hope you all enjoyed this episode. Next time we'll be moving on to taking Kuar, and potentially also moving on to Mon Calamari. Until next time, keep being awesome everyone, and I'll see you around.